So, the newest episode of Helluva came out. Like always, I'm going to give a quick rundown of what happens in the episode and then give my thoughts after. So, right off the bat, we found out that Fizz and Ozzy are dating. This was something that was hinted at during Season 1, Episode 7, but this episode is where it's fully revealed. We see the relationship between the two in the interior of Ozzy's house. Fizz goes into the greed ring with his pets and runs into Blitz. The two have a fight and get hog-tied into a room with Crimson, Striker and the rest of the mobsters. Striker is now working for Crimson. The pair get kidnapped and ring Asmodeus' phone to try and hold Fizz for ransom. Stolas and Ozzy were having a meeting because Stolas wants Blitz to get his own Asmodean crystal, which will allow him to travel into the human world whenever he wants. Ozzy refuses, however they're interrupted by the aforementioned phone call. Fizz and Blitz are in a cage and have a conversation between themselves and with Striker. Stolas and Blitz discuss the terms of the ransom. Meanwhile, Blitz and Fizz finally break out of the cage and kill a room full of mobsters. Crimson and Striker come back and attack the pair. As they're fighting, Fizz and Blitz talk about their past falling out and we see the flashback of how it happened. Blitz was responsible for burning down the circus, which led to Fizz losing his limbs and the death of Blitz's mother. Blitz explains that it was an accident and he wanted to confess his feelings towards Fizz. He was actually trying to help, but got scarred in the process. The pair go back to fighting and Fizz performs the only song of the episode called Look at This. They escape out of the exploding warehouse and are about to be free until Striker grabs Fizz. Blitz shoots some gas cans and the place explodes. This scene is eerily similar to the previous flashback, however this time Blitz rushes in to save Fizz. The two have a hug. Fizz makes his way back to Ozzy and the two embrace each other. Stolas leaves and Fizz and Ozzy most likely kill Crimson's lawyer. Fizz gets a new robotic arm and tells Ozzy to give Blitz an Asmodean crystal. The two leave to make love and the episode ends. With the episode recap, it's time to get into my thoughts. I'll start with the things I enjoyed, which is basically everything. This episode in my opinion was hands down the best one in Season 2, and is tied with Ozzy's as my favourite episode of the show so far. Ozzy's had the perfect mix of comedy, romance, music, lore, and heart-wrenching moments, and this episode is the same. This strategy worked the first time and it worked again here. Oops is the longest episode of the show so far, sitting at 27 minutes, and it used every second of the runtime. It didn't feel rushed or too slow. The thing most people will immediately pick up on is the stellar animation. Helluva always looks fantastic, but this episode stands ahead of the rest. This episode featured additional outsourced animation from Toon City, which is an animation studio that's working on Hazbin Hotel. It'll be interesting to see if they're brought in to help with future episodes, and whether or not they'll measure up to this one. Regardless, the episode looks beautiful. The change in scenery between the Lustring and Greed is phenomenal, and every frame is packed with detail. This episode was delayed a little, and I could see why. It's easily the most complicated design-wise so far, except for perhaps episode 8. It was well worth the wait, and the entire Spindle team deserves a round of applause for the care they put into it. Writing-wise, I thought it was fantastic. Previous episodes had some issues with tonal shifts, inconsistent plot points, and too much focus on specific characters, while in this one it was a perfect balance. Every character got enough screen time, and as a result we were able to cover a lot of different plot threads. The pacing was well tuned, and as a result you didn't get pulled out of the action when we shifted between Fizz and Blitz to Ozzy and Stolas. The falling out of Blitz and Fizz was a long hinted at topic since Lululand, and it was amazing to finally see the context of what happened. The callbacks and Easter eggs to that episode also illuminated how well put together the script is. As for the characters, Fizz and Ozzy are now easily in my top 5 characters in the show. Fizz absolutely stole the show with his jokes, lines and personality. Blitz and Ozzy interact with him in such a fun way, to which every scene with them is a joy to watch. Ozzy and Fizz's relationship is also a good contrast to Blitz and Stolas. The two pairs are both similar but different, and I think that provides an interesting setup for future episodes. The comedy was pretty decent overall. I laughed a lot and the jokes were executed well. There was a bit of an over-reliance on dick jokes and dildos, but that makes total sense seeing that half of the episode takes place in the Lustring and in Ozzy's factories. The audio had no issues, which was nice to see. The episode's one song, Look at This, was a blast. It was hyped up a little before release, and I can see why. I think it's on par with Ozzy's song in episode 7. Like with Ozzy's, Oops has strong emotional moments. I genuinely shed a tear watching Fizz and Blitz's tragic backstory, and I feel like many viewers would feel the same way. You realise that although these characters are flawed, there's always a chance for redemption, and it was so satisfying to see Blitz save Fizz and the two share a hug. It also sets up for future plot points, since we'll find out how Blitz and Fizz's new friendship will pan out, what will happen to Crimson and Striker, and the continuation of Stolas. On that same point, the episode's villains were superb. I feel like Striker and Crimson were much stronger antagonists in this episode compared to in previous ones. It's likely they both survived, so we'll see them again in the future, and likely with some sort of scarring or harm from the damage they received. With all of the things I like discussed, it's time to get into the things I disliked. Personally, there wasn't anything that immediately stood out to me. The only thing I could say is that it would have been nice to see Blitz and Fizz return together to Aussies and see Stolas chat with Blitz. This would create a chance for some additional character development and would help contrast the two partners' relationships. The reason I think this didn't happen is because the next episode is a continuation of Oops. Episode 7 is another Fizz and Aussie episode, and it'll be the big reveal of Mammon, so I'm super excited to see what happens next. So overall, this episode blew me away. I was genuinely impressed, and although season 2 was off to a bit of a rocky start, this episode has pulled things back, and I think many fans who were on the fence had a blast watching this one. If you agree with some of my opinions or have any of your own, I'd love for you to leave them in the comments section down below. Thanks for watching.